You said nothing. You didn't text. You didn't chase. You didn't cry in front of them or try to explain yourself. And for a moment, you thought maybe that silence was your biggest mistake. Maybe you stayed quiet for too long. Maybe now they'll forget you. But my friend, I'm here to tell you something different, something real. Silence doesn't make people forget you. Silence makes them remember you forever. People expect noise. They expect chaos when they walk away from someone who cared. They expect tears, begging, long messages, and desperate attempts to fix things. That's what most folks do. But you flipped the script. You walked away with calm, with dignity, and that calm hit harder than any meltdown ever could. It shook them. Because silence, when it's done from power, becomes haunting. It echoes in their mind when they're alone. It whispers, "Why didn't they chase me?" And the brain hates questions it can't answer. You see, when you stay silent, you become a mystery, and the human mind can't rest when there's a mystery that feels personal. Your silence is the ghost in their hallway. It's the empty chair that reminds them of what they lost, but never got closure from. It's the question that ruins their sleep. Did they stop loving me, or did I just never matter enough to get a goodbye? That's the trap, folks. That's the genius of stoic silence. You say nothing, and yet you say everything. There's a lie going around that if you don't speak up, you lose your chance. That if you wait too long, the door closes forever. But let me tell you the truth. People don't forget those who made them feel deeply, even if it ended quietly. Especially if it ended quietly. Because loud endings give people permission to move on, but silent ones, those linger, those replay. And guess what? You are replaying in their head right now, more than ever. It doesn't matter if they seemed cold when they left. It doesn't matter if they posted like they were unbothered. That's performance. What matters is what happens when the lights go off and they're left alone with their thoughts. And you are one of those thoughts. You are the one they can't figure out. You are the one who didn't follow the pattern. And in a world full of desperate noise, you stood out by saying nothing. That's real power. That's stoic power. They might have pushed you away, ignored you, replaced you. But what they didn't expect was your strength. Your silence told them, you don't need to explain yourself to those who were never trying to understand you in the first place. That's when the tables turned. That's when your value began to rise in their mind. Because the one who walks away calmly, that's the one who knew their worth all along. So, if you're sitting there wondering, did I ruin everything by being silent? No, my friend, you saved yourself. You stood still while they stumbled, and now the silence you feared is doing all the work for you. They're thinking of you. They're missing you. They're feeling the void you left behind. And the best part, you didn't have to beg to be remembered. You became unforgettable by walking away in full control. You didn't stay silent too long. You stayed silent long enough to let them realize what they lost. Now pause for a second, not just in your mind. Physically stop what you're doing. Put the phone down, straighten your back, and feel what's happening inside you right now. That quiet fire rising in your chest. That's not random. That's your strength waking up. That's your power remembering who it is. You're not broken. You're not behind. You are exactly where you need to be. And your silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. That calm you held. That's the reason they're still haunted. That's the reason you're unforgettable. So don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Write this in the comments like you mean it, like it's your truth, your reminder, your battle cry. I am calm. I am power. Not just to say it, but to claim it, stamp it into reality. Let them scroll and see the comment section flooded with warriors like you, unbothered, unchained, untouchable. And if something shifted in you today, if your chest feels lighter, if your mind feels clearer, if even one sentence made you see yourself differently, then don't just scroll past. Hit that like button. Smash subscribe, and most importantly, stay close, because the person you're becoming, that's someone the world won't be able to ignore. Number 1, they expected tears, not silence. They expected a scene. That's the truth most people won't say out loud. They didn't just leave, they walked away hoping to feel powerful while doing it. They wanted to see you unravel. They needed to feel like they mattered more than you. Deep down, they expected the tears, the late-night texts, the emotional breakdown, the "please don't go." But when you gave them nothing, that's when the silence got loud, too loud. That's when the power flipped, and they weren't ready for that kind of reversal. Silence is misunderstood. Most folks think if you're not saying anything, you're weak, passive, checked out. But silence isn't weakness, not when it's intentional. Silence, when it comes from clarity, becomes a mirror. And let me tell you something, folks. Some people cannot bear to look at their own reflection. They wanted to walk away guilt-free. They needed you to fall apart so they could justify their decision. But when you didn't give them the scene they rehearsed in their head, they were left with something much more uncomfortable: their own conscience. You didn't fight because it wasn't worth fighting for. You didn't explain because some things are too deep for words. And that decision, that made you dangerous, not unhinged, not toxic, but untouchably calm. People fear that, because when someone doesn't respond with emotion, it means they're thinking, calculating, holding something sacred within themselves. And in a world where everyone overshares and overreacts, your restraint became unforgettable. Now maybe you're wondering, did I make it worse by not saying anything? That thought haunts you in quiet moments, doesn't it? You replay what you could have said, how you could have defended yourself, how maybe if you had cried a little, fought a little, they would have stayed. But the truth is, people rarely change their mind because of a meltdown. More often, they change it when the silence becomes too heavy to carry, because silence forces reflection. It creates an emotional vacuum. And most people aren't emotionally mature enough to sit in that emptiness without starting to miss what used to be there. Carl Jung once said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people." And in your silence, that's exactly what you were doing, facing your own shadow instead of throwing it at someone else. That takes courage. That takes self-respect. Anyone can scream, anyone can beg, but only someone who truly knows their value can walk away without making a sound and trust that the universe will echo the truth they didn't need to say. They expected weakness. Instead, they met someone they couldn't manipulate. That's why they're uncomfortable now. They're replaying the last moment, trying to decode your calm, wondering why you didn't react like everyone else. And in that wondering, you've become unforgettable. You see, folks, people forget what you say. They forget what you do, but they never forget how you made them feel. And when your absence made them feel small, that memory sticks. Let me give you a picture. Imagine someone who pushes over a vase, expecting it to shatter, but instead of breaking, it stands still, untouched, almost glowing. Now the person doesn't just look clumsy, they look foolish. That's what your silence did. It turned the spotlight back on them. It exposed their intentions without you lifting a finger. There's something powerful in not giving people what they expect. It throws off their narrative. It forces them to question what they thought they knew about you. And that's what they're doing now, questioning. Were you really that soft? Were you ever that attached? Or did they completely misread you? That confusion breeds reflection, and reflection breeds regret. But here's the beauty of Stoicism. You didn't stay silent to make them regret. That wasn't your game. You stayed silent because you weren't going to hand over your energy to someone who didn't know how to hold it. You protected your peace, and that choice made you powerful. People don't forget the ones who walk away with grace. They just pretend to, until the silence starts echoing louder than the noise they tried to distract themselves with. Now, you may have doubted yourself. You may have had nights where your chest felt heavy, where you almost picked up the phone, where your thumb hovered over the send button. But you didn't break. You didn't react. And that self-control? That's the sign of someone who's rising. You didn't lose anything. You gained everything. Your dignity, your peace, your clarity. And now they're the ones spiraling in silence. They're the ones feeling the absence like a weight. They're the ones wondering what it would have been like if they'd taken you seriously. They didn't expect that. But they feel it now. So don't second-guess yourself. Don't apologize for not falling apart on schedule. You did what most people are too afraid to do. You held the line. You stood in your own presence without needing to prove anything. That's not silence. That's sovereignty. And if no one's told you this before, let me say it now. I'm proud of you for choosing strength over spectacle, for being the calm in your own storm, for walking away when your soul whispered, "Let it go." Type this in the comments to remind yourself of who you are. They expected weakness. I chose power. Let them wonder. Let them miss you. Let the silence speak. Number 2. Silence triggers regret faster than words ever could. You thought staying silent meant fading away. That if you didn't say something, if you didn't speak your side, if you didn't fight for clarity, they'd forget you. That's what the fear whispers late at night, right? You should have said more. But my friend, that's not how the human mind works. That's not how memory works. Because the truth is, silence doesn't erase you. It burns you in deeper. And what people can't close, they can't stop thinking about. You see, the mind craves resolution like lungs crave air. When a story has no ending, it loops over and over again. It pulls you back to the last page and makes you read it 1,000 times, hoping maybe this time the missing part will appear. But it never does. That's what you became to them. The open loop, the unanswered question, the final scene that never came. And no amount of distraction can replace the need to resolve that kind of tension. You are still living in their mind, not in spite of the silence, but because of it. There's a psychological term for this, the Zeigarnik effect. It means people remember incomplete experiences more vividly than completed ones. A breakup with closure can be processed, but a breakup where someone just vanished? No explanations. No reactions, just stillness. That's the kind of thing that keeps people pacing the room at 2 a.m. That's the kind of absence that gnaws on the brain. You didn't just walk away, you left a mark, a question without an answer. And that mark haunts. They thought they had control. Maybe they pulled away, thinking you'd chase. Maybe they expected to see you spiral. But instead of watching you fall apart, they saw you go quiet, calm. And now, instead of having the satisfaction of watching your reaction, they have nothing but imagination. And imagination is cruel. It builds images, fake endings, emotional rewrites. They start to think things like, maybe they stopped caring entirely. Or worse, Maybe I never mattered at all. And that maybe is what eats at them. What makes this worse for them is the performance they now feel trapped in. They might have posted pictures, acted fine, laughed too loud, partied harder, trying to look like they've moved on. But underneath it, they're wondering why you didn't come running. Why didn't you ask for closure? Why didn't you beg for answers? That unspoken confusion makes them question their own worth. You see how the tables turn. Silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's a mirror. And when you stay still, they're left staring at their own reflection, and they don't like what they see. Now here's something they won't tell anyone. They regret how they handled things, even if it's not out loud, even if pride keeps their mouth shut. Regret lives there, quiet, sharp, and building. Because you became the one that slipped away without a trace. And people don't forget the ones who disappear without permission. People don't forget those who don't need closure to heal. So if you're doubting yourself, wondering if your silence made them forget you, stop. They didn't forget. In fact, they're remembering you more than ever. Because there's no peace in unfinished stories. And you, my friend, became the plot twist they can't explain, the person they thought they understood, until silence rewrote the narrative. Remind yourself who you are. You didn't need to scream to be remembered. You didn't need to beg to be valued. You became unforgettable by being the question they still don't know how to answer. Type it in the comments, I am the silence they can't forget. Let it echo. Let them feel it. Let them wonder forever. Number 3. The mind replays what it can't understand. They've gone over the moment 1,000 times by now. The last message, the last look, the way you didn't fight, the way you just went quiet. It doesn't make sense to them. It doesn't fit the script they expected. And because it doesn't make sense, their mind won't let it go. This is the part they didn't plan for, you walking away without needing to be seen doing it. And now they're stuck because the mind can't rest when it's faced with something it doesn't understand. See, people can accept loss. They can even accept guilt. But confusion, that's the real punishment. The brain is wired to close loops. It wants stories to end neatly with logic and explanation. That's how we process emotion. By tying it up in something that feels finished. But you didn't give them that. You gave them silence with no warning, no conclusion, no scene to label and file away. And now they're stuck in the most uncomfortable space of all, the unknown. They don't get to say, oh, they were just emotional, because you weren't. They don't get to say, they were obsessed with me, because you weren't. They don't even get to say, they needed closure, because you didn't ask for any. All they're left with is a gap, a puzzle missing its final piece. And the thing about gaps like that is they don't stay quiet. They echo. Every day they're faced with the same haunting question, why didn't you chase me? And that why becomes poison, slowly dripping into their thoughts, no matter how much time passes. Carl Jung believed that what we don't understand in others often reflects what we don't yet understand in ourselves. And right now, you are that mirror. Your unbothered silence, your sudden peace, your ability to walk away without leaving breadcrumbs, it exposes everything they haven't dealt with inside. You became the trigger, the emotional ink blot they can't read. Maybe you've wondered if it would have helped to speak your truth. Maybe you think that if you had just explained your side, cried a little, yelled a little, they might have finally seen your value. But let's be honest, they had their chance, and they didn't need more words. They needed to pay attention when it mattered. And now, what they ignored in person is becoming magnified in memory. That's what silence does when it comes from the right place. It doesn't beg to be heard. It forces people to listen in their own mind. The loop won't close for them because you didn't act like the others. You didn't fit the story where you were supposed to fall apart, get angry, or chase. And that messes with their ego. They expected a character they could control. Instead, they got a mystery. And mystery always outlives attention. Here's the harsh truth. They might pretend not to care. They might show off, laugh louder, move on quickly. But every time they think they've moved forward, something drags them back. It's your silence. It's the way you never gave them anything to fight or argue with. And because there's no resolution, there's no rest. That's the price of their choice. You were willing to give them something real, but they chose confusion over connection. And now they're the ones haunted. You didn't become a regret because of what you said. You became a regret because you never gave them the ending they were prepared for. And now they live in the space between what happened and what could have happened, the space you left when you chose to walk with your dignity instead of speaking just to be heard. Write this in the comments to remind yourself, I am the question they can't answer. Let that truth settle. Let it empower you. Let it echo back to them in silence. Number 4. They thought you were replaceable until silence proved you weren't. They really thought they could replace you, didn't they? They believed that walking away from you meant walking into something better, someone easier, someone more fun. So they did what people always do when they think they've won. They started seeking noise. Parties, new faces, rebound flings, endless scrolling, artificial highs. But here's the twist they didn't expect. The louder their world became, the louder your silence echoed. Not because you were trying to haunt them, but because real can't be replaced. And they finally realized, you weren't just a person, you were an experience. At first, they felt powerful. People always do when they think they've upgraded. They test the waters, they laugh a little louder, post a little more, hoping you'll see them living their so-called best life. But deep down, something starts to feel off. That new person, they don't laugh the same, don't challenge the same, don't understand them like you did. And that's when the silent comparison begins. It's not always obvious, it's subtle. It's the way a certain word reminds them of how you used to say it. The way a glance from someone else doesn't hit the same. The way, after all the excitement dies down, there's an emotional hangover. And in that quiet moment, that pause between distractions, your name slips into their mind again. Because you became the standard, the baseline, the one they didn't value until everyone else felt like a cheap copy. There's a psychological concept at play here. It's called the contrast effect. When someone experiences something real and grounded, like your love, your attention, your presence, anything less becomes obvious. Even if they don't admit it, their brain is measuring everything and everyone against you. The way you listened, the way you stayed calm under pressure, the way you made them feel safe and seen without trying to impress. And now, even in new company, they feel that emptiness, that quiet recognition. This isn't it. That's the beauty of silence. You didn't scream, "You'll miss me." You didn't need to. You let life do the teaching. You stepped back, and they stepped right into their own lesson. Because here's the truth. People don't miss what was loud, dramatic, or replaceable. They miss what was genuine. They miss the ones who didn't fight for attention, because those are the ones worth chasing when the fog clears. Maybe they thought you'd be easy to forget. Maybe they thought you were like the rest. But what they didn't realize was that your silence wasn't emptiness. It was presence in disguise. You're still in the room. You're still in their thoughts. You're still the weight on the scale when they try to measure what they've found against what they lost. And now they're trapped in a game they created, comparing new people to someone who had already left the building. That's what silence does when it's earned. It turns into gravity. And no matter how far they run, they keep orbiting back to you. So don't doubt what your absence is doing. Don't question whether you're forgotten just because they're loud right now. Loudness is often a cover for emptiness. But silence, true stoic silence, it leaves a legacy. Write this in the comments to remind yourself, I am the standard they can't replace. Say it, believe it, and carry it like the quiet storm you are. Number 5. You didn't chase. Now they're chasing closure. You used to be the one overthinking, didn't you? Wondering what went wrong, if you were too much, if they ever cared at all. You played every moment back in your head, trying to make sense of how someone could disconnect so easily from something so real. But then something shifted, not in them, but in you. You stopped reaching out, you stopped explaining, you stopped trying to prove that your love was worth holding on to. And that silence, that self-respect, it hit harder than any message you could have sent, because now they're the ones chasing the answers. At first, they probably didn't notice. People like that are always too caught up in their own world to notice the first quiet signs of someone pulling away. But time has a strange way of revealing what ego tries to ignore. They started wondering where your energy went, why your name stopped appearing on their phone, why the person they thought would always be there suddenly wasn't. Now they're doing what you used to do, checking, watching, rereading. They scroll your page, quietly, looking for signs, wondering if that post is about them, wondering if you're talking to someone new. They may not admit it, but they're searching for proof that they still matter, that they weren't just a moment to you, because now they need the closure that you already gave yourself. This is what I call the boomerang of dignity. When you stop chasing someone who doesn't value you, you create a vacuum, not out of manipulation, but out of maturity. You stepped back not to play games, but because you finally realized chasing someone who walks away is how you teach them they can treat you like an option. And the second you stopped doing that, the dynamic flipped. They lost control of the story, and suddenly they're the one left with questions. Did they ever love me? Why didn't they try harder? Were they just pretending to care? The irony. Those are the exact questions you used to ask yourself. But now the weight of those doubts is sitting on their chest, because silence makes people reflect. And reflection is uncomfortable when you're the one who took something real for granted. You didn't slam the door. You didn't burn the bridge. You just walked away, head high, hands clean, heart intact. And that is what they can't get over. Not that you hated them, not that you attacked them, but that you left without needing revenge. That's the part that eats at them now, because they expected you to break, and instead you built yourself back in silence. They know it's too late to get the old version of you back, the one who would have bent over backwards to explain everything, the one who would have begged to be heard. That version of you no longer exists. And what's left? Someone solid, someone calm, someone who doesn't beg for love, because they've become the love they once tried to chase. So let them wonder, let them scroll, let them drown in the questions they never thought they'd have to ask. You don't owe them a single answer. You don't owe them a reply, because self-respect is loud in its own quiet way. And the person who stands still, grounded, unbothered, always becomes the one worth chasing in the end. Type this in the comments to lock it in. I don't chase. I attract truth. Say it like you mean it, because that's who you are now, the truth they ran from, and the closure they can't find. Number 6. Distance created desire. Distance doesn't kill connection, it reveals it, and in your case, it amplified it. When you pulled back, they didn't feel peace. They felt pressure. They didn't feel free. They felt lost. Because absence, when it follows something real, doesn't feel like relief. It feels like hunger, a craving with no source, and whether they admit it or not, they're starving now. For the energy, the attention, the presence you used to give so effortlessly. You didn't disappear to hurt them. You didn't pull away out of spite. You did it because you were tired of pouring yourself into someone who couldn't hold it. You stepped back to breathe, to reset. But in doing that, you did something far more powerful than you could have planned. You gave them emotional silence, and that silence created emotional distance. The very thing they swore they wanted is now the thing that's haunting them the most. Because here's the truth, people don't crave what's always available. They crave what suddenly isn't. This is the psychology of emotional starvation. It happens slowly. At first, they convince themselves they're fine. They say you were too much, or too intense, or too emotional. But when that too much disappears, suddenly they feel not enough. The attention is gone. The energy is gone. The constant checking in, the thoughtful presence, the loyalty, all of it gone. And now they're left with the hollow sound of their own choices. You were their emotional meal, not a snack, not a sideshow, but the main course, and they consumed it casually, never realizing how full they were until you walked away. Now they're starving, and they're starting to remember just how good it felt to be fed by someone who genuinely cared. Not flattery, not manipulation, real care, the kind that can't be faked or fast-forwarded. People will always remember who gave them everything and then gave them nothing. That contrast burns. It exposes the gap between what they thought they wanted and what they actually needed. You didn't force that realization on them. You just let the silence stretch. And the longer the silence stretched, the louder your absence became. Distance made you desirable because it finally made you rare. And when something is rare, it becomes valuable. That's how human nature works. Familiarity blinds us. But distance wakes people up. Suddenly they're not just missing you, they're realizing what you were, the peace, the depth, the loyalty, the way you listened, the way you held space for their chaos. And they threw it all away, thinking they could find it again, anywhere. But now they know better. They're learning the hard way, and that desire, that gnawing, aching desire, that's not love, that's realization, it's recognition, it's the body remembering what the mind tried to forget. And no matter how they try to distract themselves, the absence keeps growing. Because you didn't just walk away, you stopped feeding them emotionally. And when someone's used to being fed by something that genuine, the hunger doesn't go away. Let them feel it. Let them miss you. You're not cold for stepping away. You're wise. You finally stopped pouring where nothing was growing, and now they're the ones feeling dry, parched, reaching for something they once had, but didn't value when it was overflowing. Write this in the comments if this hit home. My distance created desire. Let it be your reminder. You didn't lose them. They lost access to what they didn't appreciate. And now the space you gave them is the same space that's teaching them everything they refused to learn. Number 7. Silence becomes power when they know they don't deserve a word from you. Silence, when it comes from awareness, isn't surrender, it's a strategy. You weren't quiet because you had nothing to say. You were quiet because you realized that not everyone deserves access to your voice. And that changes everything. That's not weakness, my friend. That's restraint. That's the Stoic rule of value in motion. When you know who you are, you don't throw explanations at people who already decided not to understand you. See, people don't always recognize wisdom when it's loud, but they feel it when it's still. You could have sent the long messages. You could have defended yourself, corrected their version of events, poured your heart out, trying to make them see your side. But you didn't. Because somewhere deep inside, a stronger part of you whispered, "Let them wonder. Let them sit with the silence they earned." And that's when the power flipped, because silence in the hands of someone who knows their worth becomes undeniable presence. It becomes weight, pressure, echo. When you choose not to explain, it forces them to confront themselves, to hear their own guilt louder, to sit with their own narrative without you fixing it for them. You stopped rescuing them from the consequences of how they treated you, and that's what made your silence heavy. This is where Stoicism shines. The ancient Stoics didn't waste their breath on people who weren't ready to listen. They spoke with intention, with precision, because they knew that words lose power when they're handed out for free. You followed the same path, not because you studied philosophy, but because you followed self-respect. And when you respect yourself deeply, you don't hand out explanations like candy. You become selective, and in that selectiveness, your value rises. Let's be honest, they wanted you to beg, they wanted you to speak up, just so they could feel superior in ignoring you. That's the game they expected. But when you didn't play, when you didn't send that "I miss you" text, when you stayed silent even though your heart was loud, that's when they lost control. Because now they know they don't deserve a word from you, not a sentence, not a syllable. And that realization is heavier than any insult you could have delivered. Now every word they wish you'd say becomes a ghost. Every memory gets replayed without your voice to guide it. They try to imagine what you're thinking, whether you've moved on, whether you ever cared at all. And the worst part for them, they'll never know, because you didn't just stay silent, you elevated above the conversation entirely. You left the argument, you left the need to be right, you left the addiction to being seen, heard, and validated. That's what true power is. That's what they didn't expect. They thought silence was giving up. But in reality, silence was you rising above their level of emotional immaturity, and doing it without needing applause. So the next time doubt creeps in, the next time you think, "Maybe I should have said more," remember this: they don't deserve the version of you that had to explain your worth. You didn't stay silent because you were weak. You stayed silent because you finally knew you were rare. Write it in the comments if you feel this in your bones. My silence is sacred. Let it be a reminder, not all battles are worth entering. Sometimes the greatest power is choosing not to speak and letting your absence do the talking. Number 8. They'll come back, because unfinished stories always do. They might not come back with flowers in hand or an apology on their lips. It might not look like a movie scene, but make no mistake, they will come back. Not necessarily because they miss you in some soft, romantic way, but because they can't get away from you. Because you didn't just walk away, you left the story open-ended. And the human brain? It hates unfinished stories. We're wired to chase closure. It's not a choice, it's a function of the mind. When something ends without explanation, it loops, it replays, it scratches at the walls of the brain, trying to find a clean exit. And when that exit doesn't come, the obsession begins. That's what you've become to them. A cliffhanger, a question mark, a door they never got to close. They tried to move on, tried to distract themselves with noise, chaos, new people, temporary highs, but even in the loudest moments, your silence follows them. You weren't supposed to disappear like that. You weren't supposed to go quiet, hold your power, walk away without giving them a final scene. That's what's eating at them now. They can't figure you out. They don't know what page you're on. They don't even know if you care anymore. And that unknown? It's not peaceful. It's torture. Psychologists call it the object permanence of emotion. Even when someone isn't physically present, the emotions they stirred remain alive, especially if they were never resolved. You didn't just ghost them. You became a part of their internal dialogue, and because they never got to win, never got to control the narrative, their ego is bleeding. They might pretend they're fine, they might post the laughs, the trips, the new people, but behind the curtain, they're watching you. Quietly, anxiously, they're reading your silences like scripture, decoding your absence like a mystery novel. Because what they can't understand, they can't escape. And what they can't control, they have to revisit. You're in their mind not because you shouted, but because you vanished. Not in a dramatic way, not in a petty way, but in a calm, unshakable, soul-settling kind of way that left them wondering, what just happened? That moment of confusion was the seed, and now it's growing into obsession. They'll come back. Not always with the words you expected, but with energy that says, I never figured you out. They'll send a message. They'll bring up a memory. They'll find a way back into your life, even if they have to pretend it's casual. Because humans always return to what made them feel deeply, especially when they were the ones who weren't ready for it. But here's the key, my friend. You don't need their return. That's the real twist in this story. You've grown in the silence. You've healed in the distance. You've become the version of yourself that doesn't need validation to feel valuable. So, if they come back, let it be what it is, not your rescue, but their reckoning. Because unfinished stories don't just return to finish themselves, they return to face the truth they tried to run from. And you are that truth. Write this in the comments to lock it in. I am the ending they can't reach. Let it echo, let it settle, let it remind you that when you carry peace, presence, and power, the ones who underestimated you will always find their way back, even if it's just to realize they never should have left.